Alright, whatever you do, don't skip this video. This video is so profound, filled with so much astounding information regarding the prediction that James Earl Jones, the famous actor who was the voice of the Lion King and the voice of Darth Vader, will die on May 17th, 2024. This video is a must watch. I will talk about many things, including, just for examples, how the 1989 World Series earthquake and James Earl Jones's reading of the poem at the beginning of the broadcast right before the earthquake, the 7th Commissioner of Baseball's poem. I'll talk about the 1st Commissioner of Baseball and his Antichrist symbolism and the 18th Amendment, which restricted people being able to buy and sell alcohol, which is part of this big picture that God is illustrating to point to the restriction on being able to buy and sell food as described in Bible prophecy, unless one takes the mark of the Antichrist. And this will come about after the coming solar flare on the surface of the sun that will knock out the nation's power grid. And God is using as a symbol for this symbolism the lion's roar, which is why James Earl Jones was the voice of the Lion King. I will talk about the day that the Jews were able to openly pray for the first time on the Temple Mount. In Bible prophecy, it is said that the Lord will come and return like a roaring lion to defend his holy mountain, the Temple Mount, which is why James Earl Jones is connected to all of this. I will talk about the discovery by the Japanese astronomers of the first ever super flare on the surface of another star that was exactly in the neck of the lion constellation, Leo, hence the voice of the Lion King, and why the media called this discovery the lion's roar, and how it points to the upcoming lion's roar on the surface of the sun. That is what James Earl Jones's death will be pointing to. I will be talking about the Manhattan blackout and the flood backstage of the musical The Lion King as a result, and Manhattanhenge, and how this pointed to the sun, because this is the day in the year when the sun sets perfectly in between the canyon walls of Manhattan, and this connects to the flash flood in the Hell's Gate Canyon in National Park, right near where Barack Obama was born, in Kenya. And the Hell's Gate Canyon National Park is the location that inspired the movie The Lion King. And on this day, there was the power outage in the Vatican that caused the Pope to be 7 minutes late for Mass, which is why 7 people died on that day in the flash flood. I will talk about the Safari Tours as in Kenya, but this Safari Tours helicopter company and its helicopter crash on the day of the eclipse over Indonesia, which is where Barack Obama grew up for 4 years, the 44th president, and the eclipse being known for the viral image of the devil's horns as the sun was setting over the Indian Ocean. I will talk about the record-setting 9th Grammy win for Beyonce for her song from the movie The Lion King, and I will talk about the most famous line in cinematic history, "I am your father," the words that Darth Vader said to Luke Skywalker, and how this connects to the day that the actor that played the physical Darth Vader died, and how that connects to the date it is predicted that the voice of Darth Vader will die. I will talk about how James Earl Jones was born right near where Elvis was born, near Graceland, Tennessee, the Graceland estate, which is symbolism for a king's palace. Memphis is named after Memphis, Egypt, where the king of Egypt lived, and in the Bible, the king of Egypt is Antichrist symbolism. And I will talk about how Graceland is in fact symbolism for the Temple Mount. And I will talk about the killing of Martin Luther King Jr. in in Memphis, and I will talk about James Earl Ray, which hints at James Earl Jones or vice versa. And I will talk about the return of Comet Leo, as in Leo, the lion constellation. The Messiah is said to return, who is descended from the tribe of Judah, symbolized by a lion, and so much more. As you can see, this video needs to be watched. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, it is predicted that famous actor James Earl Jones, the voice of the Lion King and the voice of Darth Vader, will die on February 17th, 2024. All right, this video was originally recorded prior to February 17th. This video is about how God overwhelmingly pointed to February 17th ahead of time in regards to the predicted death of James Earl Jones. This video is so amazing, and all of the analysis in this video will be proven to be 100% correct after the prediction that James Earl Jones will die on March 25th. All right, March 25th also ended up being a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date it is predicted that James Earl Jones will die on April 11th, 17 days after March 25th, which was 44 days after February 17th. And God pairs 17 and 44 in general in his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections in order to confirm the matter. As the Bible says is required, a second witness is needed to confirm a matter, and that's the case when God pairs certain numbers together, such as 17 and 44. Now, the thing is that God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, works in terms of trails of signs that are leading to the ultimate date of the prediction. Along the way, the reason why God does this is he tells stories and reveals knowledge, which wouldn't be possible if he simply made one sign predict a date or something to that effect. It's elaborate for the purpose of God communicating very important knowledge, which is only being explained in or on this channel. God, the full intended meaning of God's prophetic signs, any of them, is that the full intended meaning cannot be properly understood without their connections and context with the other prophetic signs. This is something that is missed on all of the other channels. And that's what's being explained on this channel. And so when the prediction comes to pass, the wise person will know that they need to watch every minute of every video on this channel to learn about the important information that God has been communicating through his big picture of signs. That said, the amazing prophetic signs that were communicated on March 25th that revealed an additional 17 days are explained in the must-watch Apocalypse Now video on this channel. All right. God was overwhelmingly pointing to April 11th in regards to the coming death of James Earl Jones. And April 11th was likewise a major step. I don't even know how to emphasize that enough. This step, this April 11th date, the prophetic signs that occurred on April 11th are beyond words important. It doesn't say anything to tell you what one of the signs was, which was the death of O.J. Simpson. The meaning of that means nothing. You cannot judge what I am saying by the fact that one of the signs was O.J. Simpson, because you think you know this or that about O.J. Simpson, and therefore you make a decision as to whether or not this is interesting for you. It is one of the most important videos for sure on this channel. I've titled it the O.J. Simpson video, the death of O.J. Simpson, but there was more. That's an understatement. There's so much more. All right. So anyway, the point is here is that April 11th was in fact a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date that James Earl Jones will die on May 12th. And all of that will be explained in the O.J. Simpson video. Make sure that you watch it. How February 17th is related to all of this is that the way in which God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel, is that the prophetic signs cannot be properly understood or fully understood without their context and connections to other prophetic signs. And it is through these connections and a big picture that God is painting that he is telling stories and communicating very important knowledge. And how it works is that the signs become steps in a trail of signs, like an interconnected spider web. The prophetic signs that occurred on February 17th are explained in the James Earl Jones solar flare video and also in the King Tut video. But because this is a video explaining the signs that God was using to point to February 17th ahead of time, I'm going to play that clip here as well, right now. It is about 18 minutes. If you have already seen this in another video, you can skip ahead 18 minutes. Otherwise, the next 18 minutes will be the signs that occurred on February 18th. And then I will explain how it is that God was pointing to February 18th ahead of time. And if you skip the latter half, you will, in essence, have missed entirely the point of God's big picture of signs. All right? This is the reason for all of this. The reason for the prediction is to prove all of the big picture of signs, and that is for God communicating the important knowledge and stories, like I just mentioned. And so it would be pointless for you to simply know that God predicted the death of James Earl Jones ahead of time. That would be basically entertainment for you. It would be neat, but it isn't the point. The point is to learn why and how the big picture of signs does point to all of this in order to appreciate what God is communicating. All right, so again, this is an amazing video. Stay tuned. I'm just going to play an 18-minute clip explaining what actually happened on February 17th. I'll explain this first, and then we'll get into the other information. All right, this is an explanation for the amazing prophetic signs from the righteous Christian God of the Bible that occurred on February 17th, these signs that were expected in advance of February 17th, because it was known that God was pointing to February 17th, and this was known in advance of February 17th. And these signs related to, as was known ahead of time, James Earl Jones and the predicted death of James Earl Jones, and the historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River, and its predicted crash finally after 100 years over Niagara Falls. All right, now this email was composed on February 18th, as we can see, and this was my analysis that I wrote regarding what had happened. I wrote to some friends here. All right, so it was expected that on February 17th, James Earl Jones would die and the barge would crash over Niagara Falls. The voice of the Lion King is symbolism for a solar flare, a lion's roar. God is using this metaphor of a lion's roar for the coming solar flare on the surface of the sun. That's explained in other videos. But that's why James Earl Jones, because he was the voice of the Lion King. On February 17th, a rare solar flare erupted. Okay, so we already knew, in fact, a couple of years ago, that James Earl Jones was symbolism for a lion's roar. That actually has been known since 2000 and at least early 2020. All right, because it's been known since 2019. the summer of 2019 that God is using James Earl Jones. And then I forget how long it took to figure out that he was this was hinting at this coming solar flare, lions roar on the surface of the sun. But anyway, the point is that we already knew this a long time ago, and we knew about February 17th ahead of time. That's why it's astounding beyond words that on this date we received a solar flare sign. It's just amazing. On February 17th, a rare solar flare erupted, and that's what makes it a sign, because it's rare. This is, I'll explain, but this is news. It was a news story, in other words. Okay, a rare solar flare erupted 200,000 kilometers high above the sun. Now, what made it exceptional? Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. Do I write it? Where do I write it? Well, I'll probably explain it later on in the email, but I'll just explain it now. What made it rare is that it occurred on the South Pole. Solar flares do not typically erupt on the South Pole. They erupt at the equator of the sun. And not only did it erupt on the South Pole, but it was exceptionally high, like extremely high. So this is unheard of. It was a news story because of this. It was 200,000 kilometers above the sun, and it was at the South Pole. So let's move on. This solar flare sign was exactly 188 weeks. This is a number God frequently uses in his signs, but it is important. It is a huge thing when he does use it, because it hints at the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means woe, ! Used in the context of extreme judgment from God. That is appropriate, this connection of exactly 188 weeks to this solar flare, because the solar flare is a sign that's pointing to the upcoming woe, which is the predicted eruption of the sun that will knock out the power grid on April 1st, 2024. Okay, so this solar flare sign, though, on February 17th, was exactly 188 weeks after this amazing prophetic sign, which was the first, and God uses firsts for his signs, the first ever detected super flare. This was a new term invented because of this discovery. The first ever detected super flare on a star located right in the neck of the constellation Leo, the lion, which because of this, the media dubbed this news story the lion's roar. The super flare was 20 times more powerful than any solar flare ever detected on our sun. That's why it was a super flare. And the 20 times also hints at the 200,000 kilometers for this rare super flare on February 17th, exactly 188 weeks later. Now, the date isn't the actual date of the super flare. This was the date that it was first reported. The published study from the university that discovered this. All right, but that was the day that the media called it the lion's roar. That was the headline. All right. So this is amazing. I mean, this is one of the main signs, actually, regarding the coming, eruption of the solar flare on the sun. And so it profoundly connects to this date that we knew in advance was a Lion King, Lion's Roar date. Okay, so it doesn't get any more amazing. All right, now, this February 17th date was also 4 + 4 days after the Noah flare. So there was a flare that was a news story as well. It was an X-class flare. But what made it a prophetic sign, this particular one, was that it emanated from sunspot 7595, if I recall. Now, I can't remember everything. But whatever the number was, and I think that is the number, but it in Strong's Concordance, the 7,595th word or whatever number it was, is the word Noah. Okay? And again, February 17th, maybe I explained it earlier in another video maybe, but the date February 17th is Noah symbolism, because the flood in the account in Genesis began on the 17th day of the second month. That's why we have this amazing 4 + 4 days connection between these two solar flares, the Noah flare and this solar flare on February 17th. But why is 4 + 4 days relevant and important or significant? Because the 44th president is the Antichrist. But what confirms this, and this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel, it works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And so we need a second witness to confirm this 4 + 4 days connection. It's not enough to just have the 4 + 4 days and go, oh, cool, 44th president. No, it's not enough. We need a second witness. But God does this when it is his signs. And the solar flare on February 17th is 44 days before the predicted solar flare. This date, 4/1, April 1st. And this date was known before this 44 days connection was known. All right? So that's amazing. We have 4 + 4 days and then 44 days connecting all three of these solar flares. One of them is a predicted one in the future. Astounding. Now, regarding Noah symbolism, 7 days before this is March 25th, and that is the date that it is predicted that James Earl Jones will die and the barge will crash over Niagara Falls on the same day that Jones is predicted to die. The reason for the 7 days is because in the account of the flood, God gave Noah a 7 days warning before the flood waters came. And the barge is Noah's flood symbolism, because Niagara Falls is symbolic of the power of water moving over the earth, and it engenders a perennial rainbow, and which is God's sign regarding his covenant with man concerning judgment. And the barge was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls at the time that it got stuck. And that's symbolic of the rescue of Noah and his family in the ark. Okay, so that's why the barge will crash on March 25th, predicted. This is the prediction, because it'll be 7 days before the predicted solar flare that will knock out the power. Furthermore, Niagara Falls is associated with electricity, the hydroelectric power plant there. And furthermore, that's how the men were rescued. The Coast Guard shot a lifeline from the top of the power plant in order to pull in the men trapped on the barge. Okay. And by the way, March 25th is 37 days after February 17th. That hints at 3 sets of 7. In the account of Noah's flood, there are 3 instances of 3 sets of 7. God uses 3 sets of 7 in context of his judgment. This comes also from the book of Joshua, when the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment. They marched around once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. Okay, and so the reason why James Earl Jones will die 7 days ahead of time as well is that'll be part of this sign in conjunction with the barge crashing that will indicate a 7 days warning before the lion's roar on the surface of the sun. The solar flare on February 17th was exceptional for its height. The solar flare on February 17th was exactly 1,117 months after James Earl Jones was born. That is amazing, so amazing beyond words, because again, this was known ahead of time. February 17th was known ahead of time to be exactly 1,117 months after the birth of James Earl Jones. But, and also the sun being alluded to with this connection because it's high above the earth, symbolically. So, Bama in Hebrew means high place. That's why God uses this number to point to the Antichrist, to identify him. All right? Okay, and that's because the name Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Heaven is a high place is a metaphor in the Bible for heaven. Lucifer, it is said, fell from the high place. And Jesus said in Luke 10:18 that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Barack means lightning, Bama means high place or heaven, and O in the language Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, means from. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. And this is why God uses 1,117 in his signs for this purpose, because either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. All right, so there you have the full explanation for why this is so amazing, because the solar flare that occurred on February 17th, as I just mentioned, was known, it was a story because of its height. And that's why we have this 1,117 months exact connection to February 17th. All right, the rare solar flare on the south pole of the sun on February 17th was 220.55% of a year after the solar flare over the south, after the solar eclipse, I should say, over the south pole that pointed to Shackleton's Endurance ship and the date of the eclipse was December 4th, 2021. So there are actually, I can't recall for you the details of the other eclipse over Antarctica that also points to Shackleton's Endurance ship. But the Endurance ship is a coincidence because Shackleton and his crew ended up going on the most epic test of endurance in all of history. And it just so happens that their ship was named Endurance, and this is because it hints at the endurance of the saints. Now, the reason why 220.55% is relevant is because 220 symbolizes Jesus, because the 220th word, well, first of all, 220 is 2 times 110. This is why on 9/11 it was 2 times 110 stories that collapsed, because Jesus in his first coming officially arrived on the date 110, which hints at 110. Therefore, the second coming is symbolized by 2 times 110. That's why on 9/11 the 2 towers that were 110 stories. But also, the 220th word in Strong's Greek Concordance is the word for rooster, which symbolizes Peter in Christianity. And Peter's name means rock. It is the Greek word for rock, and in the Bible, rock symbolizes Jesus. And Jesus is symbolized by this lion's roar that's coming on the surface of the sun. Now, 55, because this also hints at James Earl Jones, who was born near Memphis, and lots of other signs, Graceland, etc., and the I-55 highway. Let's just, okay, so let's leave it there. Explained in other videos. Okay, so now, the eclipse in turn was exactly 9 weeks before the Endurance 22 was launched, and exactly 13 weeks before Endurance 22 discovered the Endurance ship. That's a great story, but not for this video. 9 times 13 equals 117, the date of the resurrection of Christ. Okay, so I'm just going on the details here, but you get the idea. So the South Pole solar flare was discovered by an Argentine astronomer. Okay, this one on February 17th I'm talking about. Okay, it was discovered by this Argentine astronomer. I think he was an amateur astronomer. I'm not sure about that though. Maybe, probably not, because it's the sun, right? I don't know though. But the point is that the Antichrist, the first of the two Antichrists, Pope Francis, is from Argentina. The solar flare was 3 days after the Kansas City shooting, after the Super Bowl, the victory parade, which was 3 days after the Super Bowl, which pointed to Francis. Okay, the Super Bowl was all about the number 13, as explained in the Swift Super Bowl video. All right, and it was all about Francis. That's why San Francisco was in the Super Bowl. And these 3 days connecting with 313, with the number 13, that's the day that Pope Francis was elected. All right, and the Super Bowl was about how Kansas City won by 3 points, 3 seconds remaining in the game. The quarterback passed for 333 yards, etc. In the overtime, the third period, all right, etc. So I don't know. The article needs to be read to appreciate the solar flare and how it was rare. So I'm writing to my friends there, but I think you got the idea. It was rare because it was from the South Pole, and it was 200,000 kilometers above the sun. Anyway, there you have it. There you have also the explanation for how February 17th was an important step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date that James Earl Jones will die and the historic barge will crash over Niagara Falls on March 25th, which will be a prophetic 7 days warning before the predicted solar flare on the sun, a lion's roar, that will knock out the North American power grid. As we can see, this email was composed on February 13th, 2024. That said, it has been known since the summer of 2019 that the death of James Earl Jones would eventually be a massive prophetic sign from God. Over the years, it has been learned a lot the reason why James Earl Jones will be a major prophetic sign. At first, it was simply known that it would be a prophetic sign because James Earl Jones is king symbolism. He was the voice of the Lion King, and in Bible prophecy, the Messiah is said to descend from the tribe of Judah, which is symbolized by a lion. And so that was the first clue. This was after the new live-action The Lion King movie was released in July of 2019, and that's when that first initially was figured out or inspired. So here we are, almost 5 years later, and the trail of signs regarding James Earl Jones is coming to an end, predicted to be on February 17th, 2024, because we are now at the end. We are very close to the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, which will be in October of 2024. And the reason for this prediction that is from God, and the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, is to prove this. And believe me, I know far better than you why the purpose of this prediction and why God has made this prediction. It is to prove what I have just said. The second coming will be on the Day of Atonement in 2024, and when this prediction comes to pass, case closed. End of debate. I know there's a lot of speculation, of course, regarding this, but there comes a time when there's not any time left to continue the debates. And furthermore, essentially, almost all Christians, including those that are interested in Bible prophecy and claim to be interested in prophetic signs, are not actually watching, really, which Jesus commanded us to do. And so, what I will do with this prediction will prove that God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is true. And God's prophetic signs, which he commanded us to watch for, but if you asked the average Christian today if they could name one single prophetic sign, they wouldn't even understand the question. And they would miss the obvious one, which would be the Star of Bethlehem, but they wouldn't even put that together either. But Jesus commanded us to watch for the signs of his return, and when this prediction comes to pass, it will prove this is God's big picture of signs, which is an interconnected web, and the signs cannot be properly understood, any of them, without their connection and context to the other signs. Without their connections to the other signs, the full intended meaning of the prophetic signs cannot be properly understood. It's a big picture. And the center of the web is the Lord's return on the Day of Atonement. And so this prediction cannot come to pass if the center of the web is incorrect. All right, so that's just a brief introduction there as to the reason for this prediction, but there are many, many other reasons, as I will explain in this video, including how God has been using a lion's roar as a metaphor for the coming solar eruption and coronal mass ejection, predicted to be on April 1st, 2024, that will knock out the North American power grid. And this is another reason for James Earl Jones, who was the voice of the Lion King. Okay? And so anyway, we'll get into that in this video here. And let's begin with this email that I wrote to document this prediction and give briefly some profound, astounding reasons for how this is known ahead of time. So this email is predicting the prediction that actor James Earl Jones will die on February 17th, 2024. There is no news at this time of this writing regarding Jones's health. Okay, I have no idea what his health is. Okay, in order to make this prediction more substantial than simply predicting or simply a prediction for the death of a 93-year-old man, it is also predicted that on February 17th, 2024, the historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River will finally break free and crash over Niagara Falls. I have also known that this would eventually be a massive prophetic sign, this crash of the barge over Niagara Falls, and I have known this also since the fall or autumn of 2019. All right, now make sure you watch the Niagara Falls video. I only had time to make one video. It is a must watch. All of the videos, of course, when the prediction comes to pass, you will know that you need to watch every single minute of every video on this channel, but make sure you watch the Niagara Falls video also. All right, James Earl Jones was the voice of Mufasa, the Lion King in the movie The Lion King. In his prophetic signs, God has used Jones's voice of the lion and a lion's roar as a metaphor for the coming eruption on the sun and coronal mass ejection that will hit Earth and knock out the North American power grid. The sun is metaphorically high above the earth. The word for high place in the Bible is Bama, and it is the 1117th word in Strong's Concordance. God uses this to point to the 44th president, Obama. Okay, I'll just interject here. Jesus in Luke 10:18 said that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barack means lightning. Bama means high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven, as for example, Lucifer fell from the high place. And O, in the language Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, is the word from. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And the mainstream interpretation of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, which says that the identity to them, that the identity of the Antichrist cannot be known ahead of time until who knows what, some supposed event that they're quite vague on themselves, those that interpret it this way. Anyway, it's not true, this interpretation. It's folly. It makes no sense. Like I just said, like what's the event that they're waiting for so that we can know when we can know the identity of the Antichrist? No, it's incorrect. In fact, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the reason why Paul wrote cryptically and said to the Thessalonians that they knew what he was talking about when he was referring to the he and the what as what was holding back the Antichrist was because the reason why he wrote cryptically is because anyone in possession of the letter would have been in danger, because the he and the what is Caesar and Rome, which Constantine moved to Constantinople, thus allowing the bishops of Rome to rise in power. So anyway, the Bible prophecy is littered, literally, with numerous, clear, undeniable prophecies that clearly indicate that the Pope, a Pope, would be the Antichrist, because the office of the papacy is, of course, blasphemy and Antichrist. So all along, throughout all of history, and there wouldn't have been a Protestant Reformation without this knowledge, furthermore. But this knowledge is conveniently has been lost in the last 50 years or so, because the end is now and people need to be fooled, including most quote-unquote Christians that, for example, cannot clearly see, without even Bible prophecy telling them so, that the Pope is the Antichrist. That should be clear even without Bible prophecy. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's very serious, and I apologize. But also, the identity of the Antichrist, the second one of the two, God has been revealing overwhelmingly in his big picture of signs to be Barack Obama. And likewise with the Pope, that too should be clearly discerned with the Holy Spirit. That should be so obvious to anyone that's thinking about this with the Holy Spirit. Well, anyway, this is just one example. So the 1117th word means Bama, which is in the equation that identifies Obama as the Antichrist, as I just explained now. All right? Also, furthermore, in Zechariah 11:17 speaks of the Antichrist, and Obama was known as the night owl president, in stark contrast with his predecessor, George Bush, who was known to be the early bird president. And the first instance of the word owl in the Bible is Leviticus 11:17. Okay, so anyway, James Earl Jones is predicted to die exactly 1,117 months after he was born. Okay, that will be pointing to Barack Obama. All right? By the way, the word Bama, that is the 1,117th word, is a proper noun. It's a name. 1,116 is lowercase Bama. All right? By the way, also, the high place in the Bible, the high places is a euphemism for the false religious worship that the Jews would conduct on the tops of mountains. And the thing that God hates the most, as clearly demonstrated in the Bible, is false religious worship, mixed with true worship and religion, by the way, which is exactly what Catholicism is. It's paganism mixed with Christianity, paganism wrapped in a wrapper that makes it look like Christianity when it isn't, which is exactly the thing that God hates the most. And the Jews were repeatedly chastised for and exiled. Okay, that is Catholicism. All right? So you put the two together. God hates Catholicism, but he doesn't. I'm not saying God hates Catholics, and I'm not at all saying that Catholics cannot be saved. Okay, this isn't anti-Catholic. It's pro-truth, and I'm not anti-anyone, let alone Catholics. But God hates Catholicism, and it's a warning for my Catholic friends, including conservative ones. that think that it's just this particular pope that is bad. No, it's Catholicism that is rotten. As the Bible says in Revelation, come out of her, my people. Mystery Babylon is Rome. All right. Jones is predicted to die 44, because this is all hinting at the 44th president, okay? Now, his death will be exactly 1,117 months after he was born. And Jones is predicted to die 44 days before the predicted solar flare and lion's roar on the surface of the sun that will knock out the power grid on April 1st. Okay, so that's, from his birth, you've got 1,117 months followed by 44 days. Now, here's another thing. Jones was born 7 years and 77 days before the 7th commissioner of baseball was born. And in God's signs, this position of baseball commissioner is Antichrist symbolism because of the first commissioner of baseball, who in a moment of crisis was granted absolute power over every person in baseball. Make sure you watch the Field of Dreams prophecy video on this channel, okay? Which is the movie about the 1919 Chicago Black Sox scandal, which led to the rise of the first commissioner of baseball. It's extremely important. Okay, so the commissioner assumed his power 66 days after the 18th Amendment, which hints at 6 + 6 + 6, was ratified. Okay, let's see. The 18th Amendment is relevant because it was prohibition, which restricted the ability to buy and sell alcohol, which is hinting at the coming ability to buy and sell food that will be rationed through the Antichrist system. Okay, now enough said. I'm going to leave it at that. Make sure you watch the Field of Dreams prophecy video. In Bible prophecy, the period of the Antichrist's rule is symbolized by 42 months. The 7th commissioner died exactly 5 months after assuming the position on April 1st, 1989, which is exactly 420 months before the predicted solar flare, lion's roar on the sun that will knock out the power grid on April 1st, 2024. The reason why this connection between the beginning of the 7th commissioner's reign and the solar flare is relevant will be apparent in a minute after some further explanation. In the Bible, Noah's flood lasted for exactly 5 months, which is why the 7th commissioner died exactly 5 months after assuming office. Jones is predicted to die on February 17th, and Noah's flood began on the 17th day of the 2nd month, which is the symbolism contained in the date 217. The Niagara Falls barge that was involved in a dramatic rescue is also Noah's flood symbolism because of the power of the water moving over the earth and the perennial rainbow that Niagara Falls engenders. And the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls is symbolic of the rescue of Noah and his family in the ark, the rescue from those trapped on the barge. Okay, so, and it is predicted to crash this Niagara Falls barge over Niagara Falls on the date 217 because this is Noah's flood symbolism. To open the broadcast of Game 3 of the 1989 World Series, James Earl Jones read the 7th commissioners of baseball's poem, which was right after he died, which is the reason why the poem was read, about baseball being a homecoming. Jones also starred in the most iconic baseball movie ever made, which was released in the same year of the 1989 World Series earthquake. And Jones starred in this movie, Field of Dreams, in which his character delivered a speech on a baseball field in a cornfield about how baseball history is intertwined with American history and about how America could be great again. Just over 3 minutes after reading the poem to open the broadcast of Game 3 of the 1989 World Series was the 1989 World Series earthquake that knocked out the power in the broadcast booth. In God's signs, the number 726 is prophetic and relates to the rescue of God's people from the Antichrist. The seventh commissioner of baseball was born 726 days after astronomers, during an international astronomy conference, observed highly unusual sunspot activity that formed into a, quote, quite perfect crucifix on the surface of the sun, unquote. That might not be what is for sure the exact quote is quite perfect crucifix, okay? This connection to the seventh commissioner, who was born 7 years and 77 days after Jones was born, and the power outage in the broadcast booth after Jones's reading of the seventh commissioner's poem hints at the predicted solar flare, lion's roar on the sun that will knock out the power in America. So you see how that all comes together, right? Because again, the day that the seventh commissioner became commissioner, connects profoundly with 420 months, which hints at 42 months of the Antichrist, to the power going out. And the power went out in the broadcast booth after his poem was read by James Earl Jones. And Jones not only read a poem that year, but he also starred in the movie that year, in which there was his iconic speech about America being great again, which God is pointing to, in other words, as a judgment, warning that America is no longer great and is about to be judged and destroyed. Just like in the Noah's flood, which is why the commissioner died exactly 5 months after he took office, because the flood judgment lasted for 5 months. This is why James Earl Jones will die on the date that symbolizes the flood, the 17th day of the second month. And Noah's flood is also about a rescue of Noah and his family, and that's why the commissioner was born 726 days, which hints at the word that is 726 in the concordance, that means rescue of God's faithful, after the quite perfect crucifix was observed on the surface of the sun. The power went out in the broadcast booth after the poem about baseball being a homecoming that was used as a metaphor, rounding the bases for home plate. Okay, so what I didn't write that quite very well, but the poem is about rounding the bases in baseball and coming back home to home plate, and this being a metaphor for a homecoming. Right after, by the way, the poem was read, the broadcast went into the song by James Taylor. Speaking of James Earl Jones, James Taylor and his song, Hello, Old Friend, which is hinting at the homecoming, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, so the power went out in the broadcast booth in Game 3 of the World Series precisely as player number 33 crossed home plate during the highlights of the previous game. So the broadcast was going, the poem was read, the song was sung, and then we got into some highlights from the previous game, and right as number 33 crossed home plate and scored in that game was when the broadcast went out. I mean, literally, you're looking at the player's number on the front of his shirt, 33, right as the power goes out. And this was Game 3, okay? But also, by the way, that run scored was the result of the ball hitting off the outfield wall right next to where it says 330 feet distance from home plate, right? That was another 33. But anyway, this Game 3 and player number 33 crossing home plate. By the way, Jesus died at the age of 33. But all of this, the Game 3 and number 33, was exactly 333 months before the day that Jews were able to openly pray on the Temple Mount for the first time, which followed terrorism on the Temple Mount 3 days earlier. Bible prophecy describes the Lord coming down like a roaring lion to fight for his holy mountain in Jerusalem. Hence the voice of the Lion King connection. This date is, I can't get into I can't go off onto tangents to confirm for you the prophetic significance of this first day that the Jews were able to openly pray on the Temple Mount, okay? That's explained in other videos. It was exactly 49 years after the decree to rebuild Jerusalem and on and on. It was the third of the 4 earthquakes in the earthquake tetrad, okay? So anyway, it's explained in other videos. So let's move on. Like I was saying, you know, this is how God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, by the way, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. All right? So anyway, but the thing is that when you have a thing that you're using as a second witness, that in itself requires second and third witnesses, and then those things in themselves require second and third witnesses, and likewise those things require second and third witnesses, and it just goes off into infinity literally, and that's why it's extremely difficult to explain in linear fashion God's big picture of signs, because it's three-dimensional. Okay, so back to what I was saying. 333 months exactly after player number 33 in game 3, okay, was the day that the Jews were able to openly pray on the Temple Mount for the first time, 3 days after the terrorism. And Bible prophecy describes the Lord coming down like a roaring lion to fight for his holy mountain in the end. All right? When he at the end of the age, right? So that's the reason for another reason for the metaphor of James Earl Jones, the voice of the Lion King. All right. This is symbolism, this is the symbolism contained in James Earl Jones, the voice of the Lion King. This is why Jews were able to pray openly on the Temple Mount for the first time, and only for 1 day, exactly 42 months. Again, that's the period of the Antichrist mentioned 7 times in Bible prophecy. Okay, the Jews prayed for the first time openly for 1 day, exactly 42 months before Jones's prophetic 90th birthday. In the Bible, the number 9, as in 90th birthday, symbolizes God's judgment and is the most important number in God's big picture of signs. And 42 months is the symbolic period of the Antichrist. In the Bible, the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. The solar flare lion's roar that will knock out America's power grid will signify America's divine protection and walls of security collapsing in God's judgment. Jones's 90th birthday, which was celebrated in the 11th state, by the way, which is a pairing of 9 and 11, hinting at 9/11, will be exactly 37 months before his predicted death on the 17th day of the 2nd month, the date on which the flood judgment began, right, in the account of the flood. 37 hints at 3 sets of 7, all right? And like I just said, the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed. Okay, so in other words, the World Series earthquake, which by the way I didn't even explain at all, which I can't. It was a massive prophetic sign, arguably in the league of 9/11 in a way. But anyway, that connects with 333 months, and then 42 months, and then 37 months to the date that James Earl Jones is predicted to die, which is 44 days before the predicted lion's roar on the surface of the sun. All right. Now, and which will be like a flood judgment, because Peter said the coming judgment would be by fire and not by water, and that's what the coming judgment from the fire on the sun symbolizes. In Bible prophecy, the Antichrist will be on the Temple Mount, and he will persecute Jews in Jerusalem. That's another reason for the connection that goes through the day that the Jews were able to openly pray on the Temple Mount on the day of the earthquake, tetrad sign, etc. The Antichrist is the 44th president and the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. And by the way, this coming shot from the sun or rather I should say orange basketball shots in God's signs have been symbolic of the coming shot from the sun, which is why the basketball president is the Antichrist, or one reason. Okay, and he was the 44th president, and it'll be 44 days after James Earl Jones' death that this shot from the sun will occur. All right, now, so the Antichrist is the 44th president, and he is the basketball president who wore number 23 in high school. The day that the Jews openly prayed on the Temple Mount for the first time was exactly 2 times 3, which hints at 23 months, before the prophetic sign in which 42 Jews, as in 42 months of the Antichrist, who were being harassed by Muslims, openly shouted prayers to the God of the Hebrew Bible on the Temple Mount before being forced by Israeli security to vacate the Temple Mount. This was another prayer of Jews sign. There's only 2 that I'm aware of that were these signs involving Jews praying on the Temple Mount. And James Earl Jones connects to this other one here too. Okay, so again, the day that the Jews openly prayed on the Temple Mount for the first time was exactly 2 times 3, which hints at 23 months, before the prophetic sign in which 42 Jews, which hints at the 42 months of the Antichrist on the Temple Mount, who were being harassed by Muslims on the Temple Mount. So in response, the Jews shouted prayers to the God of the Hebrew Bible, and then they were forced by Israeli security to vacate immediately the Temple Mount. This because the Jews aren't allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. They're not even allowed to pray before drinking a sip of water. This prophetic incident on which the 42 Jews and the reason why it's prophetic is because of the number 42, right? Because of the 42 months of the Antichrist on the Temple Mount in Bible prophecy. This prophetic incident on January 17th, 2018 is exactly 73, which hints at 3 sets of 7 months, before it is predicted that the voice of the Lion King will die. The King of Kings will come down like a lion to fight for his holy mountain, the Temple Mount. This will be at the Lord's second coming, which is why this 3 sets of 7 connection is also exactly 2,222 days. The 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Bible Concordance is the word meaning woe, ! It is used in the context of extreme judgment from God. The Lord will return to fight like a roaring lion for his holy mountain on the Day of Atonement in the Hebrew calendar, which is the 10th day of the 7th month. The date July 10th, 710, hints at this. On 710, in 2020, astronomers reported the first ever, and by the way, they were in Japan, Japanese astronomers, and Japan is also symbolism for the sun. I just realized this connection here, because they're the land of the rising sun, and they have a sun on their flag, etc. All right? So further confirmation of this sun sign that I'm describing. Okay? Also, the astronomers were near Kobe, Japan, which is the city that Kobe Bryant is named after, believe it or not. And that's the location of a major earthquake, and on and on. So let's get back to this, though. So on July 10th, okay, so again, the Day of Atonement is the 10th day of the 7th month, and that's what the date 710 or 10:7 in God's big picture of signs have hinted at in the past, including this example right here, because on the date 710 in 2020, astronomers reported the first ever discovered super flare on the surface of another star. The solar flare was 20 times more powerful than the most powerful solar flare ever detected on our sun. The star we are talking about with this super flare, is located right in the neck of the constellation Leo the Lion. And this is why the news media called this discovery in their headlines of the solar flare, the super flare, the lion's roar. This is actually how I first put the two together. in James Earl Jones, the voice of the Lion King, pointing to the sun. This isn't the only lion's roar sun example, though, by the way. That's another story, though, and it's in another video. Anyway, there was an actual stunning depiction. The surface of the sun formed into a perfect, indisputable image of a lion that then roared. It was when it happened was on the day that the Supreme Court ruled in favor of gay marriage, all right? But also at that time was the Star of Bethlehem, what the media called the Star of Bethlehem, a close conjunction between Venus and Jupiter, which many believe, including myself, was what was part of the Star of Bethlehem in 2 BC, the closest ever Jupiter-Venus conjunction. Okay, but that was in Leo, the constellation, Leo the Lion, the Jupiter-Venus conjunction on July 1st, 2015, and that night before sunset was when the American hunter in Zimbabwe shot Cecil the lion with arrows and then tracked it all night while the conjunction was in Leo, the constellation, the lion constellation, and then, killed the lion the next morning. And that caused an uproar on social media. And that was also the day that ISIS destroyed the famous, I forget the name of it exactly, but the big lion statue in Palmyra. Okay, it was a big lion's roar sign, all right? Now, sorry I didn't give you the image. I got to get you the image. I'm going to find the image now of the lion on the surface of the sun roaring. All right, now back to what I was saying. The 188th word in Strong's Concordance is the word that means "whoa!" and is used in context, in the context of extreme judgment from God. All right, and so now the star is located that had the super flare is located in the neck, right in the neck of Leo the Lion constellation, which obviously makes this the lion's roar. Even the media picked that up. But it's a prophetic sign from God, and the media, of course, didn't know that. The Lion's Roar news story on 7/10 in 2020 is exactly 188 weeks before it is predicted that the voice of the Lion King will die. That is so amazing. Because like I said, even back in 2020, I knew that this was about James Earl Jones. And it connects with, because God uses frequently the number 188 in his connections. I could give you some examples. But speaking of the Lord coming down to fight for his holy mountain like a roaring lion, that day, October 12th, 2024, will be 188 days after this coming eclipse, for those that know what I'm talking about. That's Judgment Day. That's a big whoa. Anyway, and the death of James Earl Jones, the voice of the Lion King, will be 44 days before the predicted solar flare, Lion's Roar, that will knock out America's power grid. The flood judgment in the Bible began on the date 217. Jones is predicted to die on the date 217, which will be 44 days before the predicted solar flare Lion's Roar that will knock out the nation's power grid. The Lion King live-action movie, in which James Earl Jones reprised his role as the Lion King, was released on July 19th, 2019, exactly 44 days before a flash flood in Hell's Gate Canyon National Park in Kenya, right near where the 44th president was born. Hell's Gate Canyon is the location that inspired the movie The Lion King. And in the movie, Jones's character dies in a stampede of wildebeests. Okay? So there was a flash flood in Hell's Gate Canyon that killed 7 people 44 days after the release of the movie The Lion King, and the Hell's Gate Canyon is in fact the location that inspired the movie The Lion King, and there is a stampede of wildebeests, which is symbolic of a flash flood in the movie. In the Hell's Gate Canyon flash flood, 7 people died, and on this same day, the other Antichrist, as in Hell's Canyon, Pope Francis, was 7 minutes late for Mass due to being stuck in an elevator due to a power outage at the Vatican. Thus, the Hell's Gate Canyon flash flood identified both of the Antichrists described in Bible prophecy who will persecute God's people, and in Revelation chapter 12, this is symbolized by a dragon that attempts to drown a woman with a flash flood. To confirm his signs, God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together, right? As I was saying, the big picture of signs works on the principle of second and third witnesses, which is required, as it says in the Bible. And if we think about it, a simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 23 and 44. And the reason why I know this is because I've been studying God's big picture of signs from morning until night for more than full-time hours for 6 years. Okay, and the 44th president wore jersey number 23 in high school, the basketball president. The Hell's Gate Canyon flash flood in the location that inspired the movie The Lion King was 44 days after the release of the new Lion King movie, which in turn was 2 times 3, which hints at 23, days after the Manhattan blackout, which hints at the power outage coming from the solar flare. The blackout caused a flood backstage of the theater that hosts the musical The Lion King, which ruined the costumes that the musical is known for, and the performers had to perform without costumes for a few days. The Manhattan blackout in Times Square and Broadway was mostly in Hell's Kitchen, which hinted at Hell's Gate Canyon, area of Manhattan, and the Manhattan blackout is known for the impromptu street performance given by the musical Hadestown. On 2 days only of a calendar year occurs Manhattanhenge, which is when the sun sets precisely in between the canyon walls of the skyscrapers, as in Hell's Gate Canyon. Manhattanhenge in 2019 occurred during the Manhattan blackout. If you can picture that, maybe I'll try to put an image up if I can, remember, but Manhattan's dark, and then you have the Manhattanhenge event, which many people come to Manhattan for as tourists, right in between the canyon walls. This, once or twice only in a year event occurred right in the Manhattan blackout. Furthermore, it's best seen from 42nd Avenue, and I mentioned earlier that the number 42 is symbolic of the Antichrist. Okay, so, and this Manhattanhenge, Manhattan blackout connects to the flood in Hell's Gate Canyon, and because it's the canyon walls of the skyscrapers, and the power outage at the Vatican. So the Manhattan blackout connects to the power outage at the Vatican. In other words, the Manhattanhenge sunset during the Manhattan blackout and the flooding of the Lion King musical pointed to the coming power outage caused by a solar flare lion's roar on the sun, which will be 44 days after the death of James Earl Jones. And the God pairs 23 and 44, and the power outage at the Vatican and the flash flood was 44 days after the release of the movie, which was 2 times 3 days after the Manhattan blackout. James Earl Jones starred in The Lion King and also starred in the most iconic baseball movie ever made. On the same day as the Hell's Gate Canyon flash flood, a sports news story regarded the Washington, D.C. baseball team and their jokingly holding up 2 of their players for the stadium's Simba Cam, which is when people hold up their babies or pets for the stadium camera so that everyone can see them on the big screen. This is inspired by the iconic scene in The Lion King, in which baby Simba, the baby lion Simba, is lifted up for all of the animals to see. Obama used a clip of this scene at the White House press correspondents' dinner to joke, as in the players jokingly holding each other up for the Simba Cam. He joked that it was the scene of his birth, which is stunning because it was the biggest lie of history, and he told it with a joke because, of course, he was born in Kenya, right near Hell's Gate Canyon, which inspired the movie The Lion King, which is where this iconic scene takes place. This was Obama's big lie in the prophetic. That particular correspondence dinner was prophetic for more than just this reason, but because it was the day that Trump was there too, and Obama made fun of a Trump presidency, and then Trump did become the president. And also there was a skit involving a parody of The King's Speech, the movie back in 2010, right? Okay, and so anyway, the day that all of this happened, this particular White House correspondence dinner was 3 days after he finally released his forged birth certificate in a digital format only, which was proven to be a clear forgery because no one else would do it. The sheriff of the 6th biggest county in the U.S. sent the digital, hired 2 forensic labs in Europe to give the impression of impartiality to take a look at it, and they came back with 9 clear, obvious points of forgery that indicated it was a layered document. Furthermore, the woman responsible for that died in a plane crash, which is why Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. That's another prophetic sign, by the way, which I can't get into here. So I think it's in the JFK prophecy video, JFK Jr., who also died in a plane crash. All right. Now, so in the Bible, 30 years is symbolic of a king. The Simba Cam story, news story about the baseball Simba Cam, like I just mentioned, in a baseball game, was on the 30th anniversary of the death of the 7th Commissioner of Baseball, which hints at the Antichrist king in Washington, D.C., because the baseball players played for Washington, D.C. The game was in Washington, D.C. And just a reminder again, James Earl Jones starred in the most iconic baseball movie ever made. All right. And he was the voice of the Lion King. And this was a Simba Cam Lion King sign. Okay. And it was 30 years exactly after the death of the 7th Commissioner of Baseball. And again, Jones was born 7 years and 77 days before the birth of the 7th Commissioner of Baseball. It's all an interconnected web, as you can see. So this Washington team that year went on to win the World Series, their franchise's first win in its literal 50 years history. Okay, 50 years is prophetic in the Bible. which is about returning to the original state. So, which is why 50 years later, they finally won the World Series, this franchise. And the franchise began in Montreal, in Canada. Montreal is French for Mount Royal. And in this sign hints at the Royal Temple Mount, the future dwelling place of the King of Kings. After he comes and fights for his holy temple, holy mountain, like a roaring lion. The Washington baseball team's 50 years sign and Simbacam sign on September 1st, 2019, which definitely hits at 9/11, was exactly 50 days after the Manhattan Henge during the Manhattan blackout. All right? So it was a 50 years sign, and it occurred 50 days after the Manhattan Henge. And by the way, 3,000 days before the Manhattan Henge and the flood backstage of the theater that hosts the musical The Lion King was Obama's birth certificate joke with the Lion King clip. And the number 3050 in the Bible both symbolize the church, which will be persecuted by the Antichrist, Barack Obama. Before I move on, in case I don't mention it later, this date here, which was the day of a power outage, which connects to the blackout in Manhattan, etc., was exactly 4 times 40 years. So it was 44 days after the release of the movie The Lion King. It was also exactly 44 weeks after the Lion Air plane crash, okay, which hints at the coming plane crash of Harris and her replacement with Barack Obama. But also this day, this power outage at the Vatican and in the Hell's Gate Canyon flash flood was exactly 4 times 40, which also, of course, since at 44 years exactly after the Carrington event, which was the big solar flare coronal mass ejection that hit Earth and fried the telegraph communication system at the time. Had it occurred in our modern day with our modern infrastructure, it would have been a complete disaster. And the scientists, astronomers say that, this is going to happen again at some point. And it will on April 1st. Okay, so that's also amazing. Now, let's move on. The Lord is coming to fight like a roaring lion. The Lord coming to fight like a roaring lion is described in Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4. The date 3/14, March 14th, in 2021, was exactly 40 plus 40 weeks after the Hell's Gate Canyon flash flood, which was 44 days after the release of the new Lion King movie. 3/14 in 2021 was also 444 days, as in the 44th president, after the safari tours, as in Kenya, because Kenya is known for its safari tours, and Hell's Gate Canyon sign, that's what we're connecting to, right? And Obama, who was born right near Hell's Gate Canyon, helicopter crash in Hawaii, where Obama is from, that killed 7 people, as in the 7 people that were killed in the Hell's Gate Canyon flash flood. All right, so let's do that again. So this 3/14 date was 444 days after the Safari Tours helicopter crash in Hawaii that killed 7 people. In God's signs, helicopters symbolize the dragon in Revelation chapter 12 that attempts to drown the woman with a flash flood, and the X shape of helicopters' rotor blades symbolize the mark of the Antichrist. The helicopter crash was on the same day as a prophetic eclipse that peaked right near Jakarta, Indonesia, where the 44th president grew up for 4 years, and the eclipse was known for the image of the sunset over the Indian Ocean that appeared to resemble devil's horns. The devil's horns eclipse, you probably remember it. It's an image that went viral. The image is in other videos. I just can't get the images all into this video. But anyway, it was a viral image. The eclipse was known for this. The devil's horns, it occurred on the same day as the prophetic helicopter crash, the Safari Tours helicopter crash, which connects with 444 days to the date 314, which I'll explain in just a second. Okay, this eclipse and Safari Tours helicopter crash was in turn exactly 23 weeks after the release of the new The Lion King movie. That's a pairing of 23 and 44. Because, okay, you got, I think I'm about to get to that. Therefore, the new Lion King movie was 23 weeks, followed by 444 days to this date 3/14 in 2021. As well, the new Lion King movie was 44 days and then 40 plus 40 weeks before this date 3/14 in 2021. Right? I explained that too. 44 days was the Hell's Gate Canyon flash flood, which is 40 plus 40 weeks before this date 3/14. So what's with 3/14 in 2021? On 3/14 in 2021, which, by the way, again, hints at the roaring lion in Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4, Beyonce, who starred along with Jones in the new The Lion King movie, won a record 9th Grammy Award for a song for her The Lion King album. Okay, she broke the record with 9 Grammy Awards, and it was for a song from her Lion King album. She also won a Grammy for her video for her music movie, Black is King, and James Earl Jones's King symbolism, right? The voice of the Lion King, Antichrist King, Darth Vader, played King Jafar in Coming to America, right? God uses records for his signs, and on the day she won a record 9th Grammy, her daughter also was the youngest person, as in a record, to win a Grammy at the age of 9. Again, the number 9 is the most important number in God's signs as it symbolizes God's judgment in the Bible. This was 9 days after the release of Coming to America, in which James Earl Jones played a dying and dead king, which hints at the death of Jones. And that was in turn exactly 900 weeks after the release of James Earl Jones Reads the King James Bible. Or rather, I should say, James Earl Jones Reads the King James Bible. Beyonce is known to be obsessed with the number 4, and her daughter is named Ivy after the Roman numeral for 4. And this hints at the 44th president. On the same day that Beyonce won her record 9th Grammy, the record-setting, by the way, she has a tattoo of the Roman numeral on her finger as in lieu of a wedding ring, and she also named one of her albums 4, all right? Okay, so on the same day that Beyonce won her record 9th Grammy, the record-setting passing king, most passing yards in his career, of the NFL, player number 9 for the Saints, the New Orleans Saints, which hints at judgment for the church, because number 9 symbolizes judgment, who won Super Bowl 44, as in winning Grammy Awards, right, announced his retirement, which is a sort of death. It is death symbolism. The saints symbolize the church, as does the number 153. Fish in the Bible symbolize the harvest of souls at the end of the age of fishing for men. The saints and the Lion King signs on 3/14 were 40 plus 40 weeks after the release of the new The Lion King movie. this 40 plus 40 weeks is also 153% of a year. The Lion King signs on 314 are also exactly 153 weeks before it is predicted that James Earl Jones will die. All right, this is a typo. I got it correct earlier in this paragraph. Okay, the Saints and the Lion King's signs on 314, 2021, they're exactly 40 plus 40 weeks after the flash flood in Hell's Gate Canyon, the location that inspired the movie The Lion King. Okay, and that in turn is 44 days after the release of the new Lion King, the movie. All right, but this 40 plus 40 weeks is also 153% of a year. Now, the Lion King signs on 314 are also exactly 153% of a year, 153 weeks before it is predicted that James Earl Jones will die. Okay, so that's astounding. I'll just repeat that because 314, these Lion King signs, right? Preceding that, you've got 153% of a year connection, and following that, you have 153 weeks connection. And this symbolizes the end of the age of fishing for men, when the Lord returns like a roaring lion. Hence the date 314, Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4. And by the way, Kamala Harris is predicted to crash in the area code 314, St. Louis, which will also hint at the Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4. All right. There's another reason for the 314 here too, as I'll explain in the next paragraph. But you see how amazing that is? Okay. Jones was also the voice of Darth Vader in Star Wars, and Darth Vader is Antichrist symbolism. The most famous line in cinematic history is when Darth Vader told Luke Skywalker, "I am your father." In Exodus 3:14, God, in the Bible, God told Moses that his name is I am. The Hebrew symbol for I am is the same exact symbol for the symbol for pi. Pi is 314. Right? And God says I am in Exodus 3:14. The signs that hinted at James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader, on the date 314, which hints at pi 3.14 in 2021. And James Earl Jones was the voice of Darth Vader, right? And Darth Vader says, "I am your father," the most famous line in cinematic history. Okay, this the signs on 314, March 14th, were exactly 3 months and 14 days, which hints at pi and 314, after the death of Dave Prowse, the actor who played the physical Darth Vader. This Darth Vader, "I am your father" sign communicated that God has a son, Jesus Christ. The death of the actor of the physical Darth Vader connects with 3 months and 14 days to 314, the date, which connects to the predicted death of the voice of Darth Vader. So the death of the physical Darth Vader connects to the death of the voice of Darth Vader. Okay, with 3 months and 14 days, and then the 153 weeks, as I just explained. But hopefully you got that. That's amazing beyond words, because God has tied in Darth Vader into all of this with this astounding correlation between Exodus 3:14 and pi 3.14. Again, it's this same exact symbol. So, in other words, it's proof that the God of the Bible is real, for one thing. And so will this prediction prove that. And it'll prove what I just said in this paragraph is true. And again, it's all pointing to the Antichrist king also. Okay, James Earl Jones was born near the king of rock and roll was born. Okay, James Earl Jones was born near where the king of rock and roll was born, and near Elvis's Graceland estate, which is symbolism for a king's palace, which is in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis is named after Memphis, Egypt. And in the Bible, the king of Egypt is symbolic of the Antichrist king. Martin Luther King Jr. said a few times that he believed his ministry would end in him being killed, but that he was bearing his cross, as Jesus commanded us to do. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed just to the north and slightly east of the Graceland estate. The King of the Jews was killed at Golgotha. I should say the king, as in Martin Luther King, the King of the Jews was killed at Golgotha, just north and slightly east of the Temple Mount complex, making, in other words, the Graceland estate symbolism for the Temple Mount complex, which, by the way, is why people make pilgrimages to Graceland. Okay, it was James Earl Ray who killed Martin Luther King Jr., which connects to king symbolism involving James Earl Jones. 30 years is symbolic of a king, and Martin Luther King Jr. was killed by James Earl Ray exactly 30 years after the 7th Commissioner was born, which was 7 years and 77 days after James Earl Jones was born. God has a son, the King of the Jews, who was killed near the Temple Mount. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed in a location that hints at this. Martin Luther King Jr. had a son who died 3 times 9 days before it is predicted that James Earl Jones will die. 3 times 9 hints at the time of the day that the Son of God was on the cross from the 3rd hour until the 9th hour. It is predicted that James Earl Jones will die on the date 217. This will be 217% of a year after the date that an asteroid made the closest ever detected approach to the planet Venus. In the book of Revelation, Jesus said he is the morning star, which is Venus, and he will give the morning star to those who persevere. The Antichrist, the 44th president, will test the endurance of the saints. The comet's orbital period is 40,000 plus 40,000 years, and it was said by its discoverer to be leaving the solar system at 44 miles per hour, or per second, which hints at the 44th president. This comet Leonard was named after its discoverer, which hints at the constellation Leo. Leo is short for Leonard. In Bible prophecy, the Messiah is descended from the tribe of Judah, which is symbolized by the lion. The constellation Leo depicts a lion. Comet Leo returned to the solar system, as in return of the Messiah, after a long 80,000 years, which is 40 plus 40,000 years, which hints at the 44th president, and made its record, God uses records for his signs, close conjunction with Venus on December 17th, 2021. This return of Comet Leo King sign was exactly 6 plus 6 plus 6 years, which is also 6 times 6 times 6 months, which is at 666, the number of the Antichrist. After the release of the Return of the King movie of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The return of Comet Leo, the lion, which hints at the comet Leo the Lion, and conjunction with Venus hinted at the return of the Messiah, who is said in Bible prophecy to be descended from the Lion of Judah, the King of Kings. Okay, the return of the Messiah, the King of Kings, and December 17th, 2021, the date of the return of the comet Leo, is 217% of a year before the date 217 in 2024, the predicted date of the death of the voice of the Lion King. This 217% of a year connection is also exactly 2 years and 2 months, which hints at the second coming and return of Lord Jesus Christ. This is also exactly 26 months, and the name of God in the Bible, Yahweh, is equal to 26 in Hebrew gematria. This is merely scratching the surface of the reasons for how this prediction is known in advance. For more information, please visit bitchute.com or Odyssey, spelled ODYSEE.com, video channels named Harris Crash Prediction. And also read the website trumpprediction.com. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, trumpprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the bitchute.com or the odyssey.com channel. And do it now in case you aren't able to later.